friends, I'm Russ Larson and I'm the IRC Tire Guy. Welcome to the new studio setup. Today, we're talking a commonly asked question that transcends all styles of riding. Where do you look when approaching an obstacle? Now, we've heard and probably seen 100 different breakdowns on where your eyes should be when riding higher speed disciplines. Supercross, motocross, single track, desert, and woods riding. Everyone knows the old saying, look where you want to go. Higher speeds require a heads-up riding. The best riders have the highest ability to look way ahead. But something I don't see mentioned too often is slow speed technical riding. There aren't too many where to look breakdowns when we're talking about hitting a boulder, a log, or a cliff. So what do you do? Where do you look? Before it, look at it, past it? How do you look ahead when you're riding in first gear under 5 miles an hour? These are all questions I commonly get in private lessons that I've done. Today, we'll answer them and give you a few vision techniques I'm sure will help. So let's get right into it. Usually, I start with a simple understanding I'm sure most of you know. The distance in which your eyes fixate is relative to the speed you're traveling. So the faster you go, the further out you're looking. The slower you travel, the lower and closer your eyes fixate towards your bike and immediate objects and surroundings. There's quite a difference in your vision when riding, let's say, technical rocky sections versus a groomed motocross track. Of course, on a groomed track, the speeds are much higher and so are your eyes. At higher speeds, your peripheral vision is increased tremendously. The higher the speed is, the shorter the fixations on focal points should be, making slight adjustments to avoid or approach a required line. Compared to slower speeds, we still use a peripheral focus, but because the terrain we ride is so much more busy, meaning more rocks, more alternate lines, and the speeds are decreased, this means the time in which we fixate on those focal points and the amount of focal points that there are increases. This is all a somewhat obvious understanding of vision as it pertains to your style of riding. But is there specific repeatable ways you can train your vision to increase your understanding of when and where to focus on these focal points when riding technical sections? This is a practice that I've developed in the past few years of teaching. These techniques are best practiced on a log, ledge, or boulder that you are already comfortable with. Once you've really honed in these vision practices on a comfortable obstacle, you'll see how relevant this is in just about any style of technical terrain. It's called taking snapshots. These are basically visualization techniques you're doing on the fly. I actually developed this technique after listening to Tiger Woods talk about making long putts on the golf course. I realized what he was talking about was similar to my visualization approach when executing a double blip. The reason we call this taking snapshots is you're taking mental pictures of the required area where the technique is taking place. So let's get into what, when, and where these visual practices happen. As we're on the approach of the obstacle we're comfortable with, somewhere between 15 and 20 feet away, I take my first snapshot. The focal point here is on the obstacle itself. I'm quickly assessing if the obstacle is undercut, crooked, has any grooves or sharp edges, any distinct characteristic that will put my tires at an advantage or disadvantage. Where will I have the highest likelihood of success when executing the required technique to get over this obstacle? As an example, let's say I notice the rock is angled. I'm going to immediately adjust my approach to try and make sure my tires stay as square as possible as they make contact with the obstacle. Now, after I've made my adjustments, I'm ready for the next focal point and snapshot. Note, the first mental snapshot and adjustment was made in a 5 to 10 foot span while on the approach. Now, the second snapshot is made between 5 and 10 feet away from the obstacle. Now, my focal point has changed from the obstacle itself to the ground just before the obstacle. My focus here is where on the ground will I be initiating my front tire lift. Again, I'm looking for any advantage or disadvantage on the ground before the obstacle. Is there a loose rock? Is there unsettled ground? Depending on what that mental picture says, really dictates where I will be lifting my front tire. Now that I have my appropriate lift point, my focal point on the third snapshot is back to the obstacle itself, but this time for a different reason. We're now taking a mental picture of where I want my front tire to be placed on the obstacle. This snapshot is done just before the first blip is initiated and my front tire lifts off the ground. Now at this point, because I've repeated so many double blips, I'm very confident with my front tire placement. At this point, I will have already began the load of the engine, slip of the clutch, and second blip. Now we take our final snapshot, the direct area after the obstacle. Now, often on bigger obstacles, we can't see what's on the other side as we approach and initiate lift. So it's very important, as soon as the ability to view the other side of the obstacle is available, we take a picture of what our landing looks like. Do we need to make mid-air adjustments? Is there a loose rock or something that will unsettle our landing? After those adjustments are made and we approach our landing, our eyes move back up to the next obstacle and the sequence of snapshots is repeated. As you can see, there's 4 main visual focal points and snapshots done in succession while approaching and executing an obstacle. A snapshot of the characteristics of the obstacle itself for the highest advantage, the ground before the obstacle for initiation of the first blip, the place in which the front tire will make contact with the obstacle for compression and rebound, and finally, the immediate area after the obstacle for a clean landing. The more you focus on this practice, the easier it becomes and the quicker it can be done. I'm doing this constantly in technical situations. The rapid movement from focal point to focal point, or saccadic movement of the eyes, is something that can be trained and actually practiced. The practice of the snapshot technique helps paint mental pictures and visualizations of the present moment. The best riders in the world have an ultra presence, allowing them to be steps ahead on their movement and preemptive in their instincts. I hope you're enjoying the channel, and if you are, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, as well as follow us on Instagram at IRC Moto and my personal Instagram page at RichLarson511. And until next time, keep shredding.